So
It's Corona.
Yeah.
I think we better do the proper introduction to this, I suppose. Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time as a special bonus for everybody, I'm chatting with a group of podcasters who are, let's say, among my favourite podcast hosts ever. So first of all,
so nice.
That's right. First of all, I'll get mushy. I've been nervous about this all day. Don't put me off, Matt. So, first of all, I'm going to introduce from one of the co-hosts of Reelblend, who's also the managing editor of Cinema Blend and the author of the book Release the Snyder Cut, which is obviously about releasing the Snyder Cut and the story behind those films, and also the author of the forthcoming book With Great Power. And I think we can guess what that book's about as well, hopefully. And that's Sean O'Connell. Hey, Sean.
Hello, Marv. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. Long time no see.
I know. Good to be on. I appreciate you inviting me over to this discussion. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for suggesting it. As soon as you suggested it, I thought, yep, I've got to do this. Absolutely. Also with me today, I've got from Comic Book Nation, that podcast Comic Book Nation, and from the company Comic Book, who, do I say that you're affiliated with Paramount Television, Matt Aguilar?
Yeah, I don't know. We're in the CBS family. We're in there somewhere. that's loose enough. It's somewhere.
Well, the show is shown on Paramount Plus on Sundays in the US, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, Sundays, baby.
There you go. I do listen.
Thank you. I will tell Kofi that all his outros and intros are very much appreciated. He's so good at that stuff.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to my suggestion coming true this Christmas when you all at Comic Book do a Christmas song together, apparently.
I will try my best to make it happen. I got a Christmas hat somewhere around here already. It's time. It's almost time. I can't do math.
No,
we're not that far.
We're not that far.
We're not that far away from Christmas.
No, just to put across what I mean, where this comes from is that from day one of listening to Comic Book Nation, I keep putting out there every time that Matt or Janelle or Kofi or any of the hosts of Comic Book Nation suddenly burst out into song. And there's a tag going on Twitter and all the socials saying Comic Book Nation's got talent.
My choir teacher would be quite proud. All these years later, I'm making it happen in the geek universe. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Got to keep it going. And also from the podcast Stew World Order is Rob Stewart. Hey, Rob, how you doing?
I am doing well, Marv. Thank you so much for having me. And I apparently am being joined right now by my cat. So he is saddled up next to me. He's going to help me talk about Spider-Man.
Wow, you've told everyone what we're doing there. And lastly, but not least, is Morgan Docherty from Doh'Cast, and I'm trying to remember the name of the true crime podcast as well, Morgs.
Oh, yeah, the Untitled Chronicles. So we'll be bringing both back soon, so that'll be good. And I'm super excited to be here with you guys.
Absolutely. Right. Now, did you all see the exhaustive research that I did the other day that doesn't even get anywhere near the exhaustive research that Sean had to do for his book?
I was impressed. It's a good outline. Very good outline.
I cut it down to the bare minimum instead.
Sure.
Okay.
That would only take about a week to get through.
Yes. So we are talking about the 20th anniversary, and most of us can't believe that it is 20 years since the first Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man film that starred Tobey Maguire. And, oh God, 20 years. Actually, before I go through all this, Sean, what's your first memory of this film?
I was actually really dating myself. reviewing films for official publications at that point. So I got to see a press screening of it. And, you know, in hindsight, probably lament that that's my first experience of it, you know, because when you think about getting the opportunity to go opening weekend and experience it with a crowd, probably would have been outstanding. And I didn't go opening weekend. I ended up going during the week that it opened. So I saw it early, and I got a chance to, you know, come back and write the review for it. And I'll never forget, like, it's when you see your favorite character come to life on screen and come to life the way that he did, you know, you go in with moderate expectations, tempered expectations, and then you realize that it's a perfect marriage of filmmaker and story, you know, and to see all of the elements of his origin come to life, from the, you know, the wrestling match and the death of Uncle Ben for the first time. You know, yes, it's been played at this point now, but you know, seeing it all really come to fruition was remarkable. So yeah, I mean, you say 20 years, but it honestly, in all honesty, feels like it was about 2 months ago.
It really does. What about you, Matt?
Well, I'll say that, you know, I don't know if Sean was missing anything, because I saw it opening week, but because I was going to college at the time, I couldn't go I went like during the day, because like we were going to Full Sail, so like we had a 24 kind of hour weird schedule. So like I went at like, you know, 11:30 in the morning, like it's just me and like 10 people, you know, and even though it's opening week, and I saw it by myself because I couldn't, all my friends were busy, and so I was like, screw it, I want to see this movie. So I went and saw it by myself. And I remember much to what, you know, he said, I thought he put it great, is that it's just seeing this is possible. You've seen things like this attempted with other characters, Captain America, other things, right? And there were things to love about those, but this was when you really saw like, hey, they can actually put money into this and make these scenes from the comics. Like I remember just leaving and going like, I can't believe I saw him web swing. Like I remember just leaving the theater like that. Like I can't believe I saw him just like shouting, especially like that scene where like he's swinging away from MJ and he's just like so excited to be swinging. Like that scene stuck with me. Stuff like that, the exuberance of that character that you've loved for so many years. So that was
the sound of the web sling, the sound of the web coming out good. Too. That like prior to that was Wolverine's claws. You know, the first time I heard Wolverine's claws pop, and I was like, God, they got it. How do they get it? You know? Little things like that just make you appreciate the effort that went into it.
Well, going off on a tangent, I mean, you've pulled a good one out there with the first X-Men film. That one was a surprise as well when that came out, because that succeeded expectations as well.
Well, sure it did. And, you know, this goes back to the people who are starting to make comic book movies around this time had connections to Marvel and were licensing these characters out, but fighting a little bit harder to make accurate adaptations, as accurate as they could be. You know, there are actually still notes and changes coming from studio heads that feared, you know, making them too drastically comic booky, because comic book had a different definition at that point 20 years ago. But, you know, now we know that there was a lowly assistant on the set of Bryan Singer's film who had a real eye for the way comic book movies should be told. And his name was Kevin Feige. And look what he's done since that point.
Absolutely. What's your first memory of this first Spider-Man film, Rob?
I remember seeing it opening weekend. I also think I saw it by myself. I just kind of went and saw it. And then I think a few days later, I went with two friends of mine, and we were big wrestling fans, like all throughout the 90s. Every Monday night we would get together, we would watch wrestling together. Sunday night we'd watch the pay-per-views, because my parents got me like a black box for sometimes so I could watch the descrambled pay-per-views. And then I just remember we watched the movie, we enjoyed it, and the entire like 45-minute drive home, it was just us going like bonesaw just the entire time, just enraptured by that scene.
Dear me, so many great things. What about you, Morgs?
Yeah, so obviously in 2002, when the film came out, I would have only been 3 at the time. So I remember, yeah, sorry.
Young.
Too young. But yeah, I remember watching it on VHS like a couple of years later. And it was like a really cool like red VHS case. So it was like went with the Spider-Man theme. And I remember when I first put it in, it was kind of like right at the end of the movie. So I saw, obviously, spoiler alert, I know it's like a 20-year-old movie, but the Green Goblin scene, you know, the bit with whether he dies at the end. So it was ruined for me straight away. But I still rewound it and enjoyed it at the end.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job there. I mean, the casting was impeccable for that. You know, I mean, I mean, it's a bit like, it's similar to what Feige's brought into the MCU now, where you've got top class actors in there and crew behind them and everything, and you can see the money there on the screen, and they've really given you a top rate piece of product there. Because I know Sean will remember, I'm sure, you know, when we were younger, we remember the films and the very short series that they made in the late 70s, you know, which is completely different. But there was still something about that was sort of like, because I'm like, sure, my hero was Spider-Man and always was from the beginning. So anything that came that was Spider-Man, I'd automatically feel attached to watching that anyway. But then it's like a whole nother level when they were making films like this to what they were making when we were younger.
Mhm.
For sure. And, you know, the fact that they get someone of Willem Dafoe's caliber, you know, to take on a villain role, which in all honesty, I believe that Dafoe probably gives his best Norman Osborn performance in No Way Home.
Yeah.
Because he, you know, has evolved as the character. He is truly menacing in No Way Home in a way that I don't think he quite achieves in the Raimi films. There's still a little, I don't know if I want to call it camp
Oh
necessarily.
no, it's camp.
But he's a better
call it
actor.
It's kind of,
Can I call it camp? Okay, that's fine. Okay. But he's also just a better actor. He's a better actor 2 decades
Right.
later. And I, you know, his transition, not to jump to No Way Home, but you know, the Norman's on sabbatical, honey, is like, I get goosebumps, you know, just at his delivery with that. So God bless, you know, that casting, which allows, it opens a door to get someone like Molina, you know, and then leads to a lot of these studios and these franchises realizing, oh, we can actually cast, you know, real actors in these things. And then the real actors started to realize, oh, we can make a lot of money if we take these roles. And, you know, they didn't come with a stigma anymore. They were legitimate characters.
I think for the actors, though, there's also a case of them watching these and then realizing that suddenly it's not like, because back then they might have had this image of superhero films and superhero properties that way being like the old Batman series from the late 60s, and that there was that really high level of camp, or it didn't quite have the money behind it like those, you know, the Captain Americas from that they tried to make back when, and these other films. And suddenly when they saw a film like this first Spider-Man, and before it the other films as well that we mentioned, it was like, hold on a minute, this is actually quite serious and there is something here. So that was attractive to the actors as well, to be able to play something that had a bit more gravitas to it.
Well, it was interesting because by the time this had come out, you had kind of gotten 3 different flavors to show how it would work. You got something that was pretty dark with Blade.
Yep.
Then you got the X-Men, which was kind of a blend of humor and dark. And then you got this, which definitely leaned more into the humor. So this was more of like the Batman 66 sensibilities, but combined with, at the time, modern filmmaking. So yeah, you really got to see like, okay, so you could even lean into the history of what people think about, but still do a good job with it.
Agreed. Well, also, ironically, out of those 3, I feel like both extremes on the spectrum aged better. This Spider-Man movie ages better, and Blade actually ages pretty damn well, amazingly, compared to like the first X-Men. If you go back, I don't know, I recently watching all 3 of these, the first X-Men's kind of rough. It was kind of rough. X2 is, you know, amazing, and they fixed those things, but like these 2, the way they leaned into those a bit further. I mean, this is one of the most comic booky movies so far. Like even compared to some of today's stuff, like they lean hard into like sequences that feel like they were pulled out of the books, and dialogue too sometimes, which, you know, kind of some of it ages better than others, but it's just impressive still to see like how much Raimi gave credence to the books and the vibe and the tone and melded that with that cinematic flavor.
It's odd that you have a movie that was this successful, that was this popular, that was this beloved, and yet there's also a moment in it where you see a villain running away from the hero going, "We'll meet again, Spider-Man." It's like, how do you get away with doing that and yet people still love it?
Yeah.
Tone. It's all tone. If you're gonna embrace it from the get-go, you know, and have going back and rewatching Spider-Man, there are the scenes that are, you know, burned into our brain. They're big action set pieces and character moments. But the one that really caught my eye watching it again was Peter fighting Flash in the hallway, and the really effective way that Raimi shows his powers. You know, it's something as simple as allowing Toby to sort of slow down and process it much faster, and then quickly it speeds back up, and you know, just him nailing that tone and figuring out it's, you know, it has some of his Evil Dead touches to it. It has things that he brought to Darkman. And I probably wouldn't have picked him for Spider-Man back in the day, but now you realize that, you know, he's the blueprint. He really is. He kind of established how to tell these stories and tell them the right way.
I think that happens with most of these products though, where you know, when they announce, oh, this person's doing this or this person's doing that, how many times have we actually seen it where they've announced things and then you suddenly get a public outcry of, oh God, not them, you know, because we had it with Robert Pattinson for Batman, for the Batman, and we had it back in the day for Michael Keaton for that 1989 Batman as well, and everybody, there was an outcry, and then suddenly when the films come out, it almost makes more of an impact then because they watch them and you'll say, hold on a minute, I was wrong, this really works. So I think sometimes and quite often these things happen and we are surprised by them, and I think that's why it works.
Good point.
I think what we've learned as a society as if you're ever casting a Batman movie, just expect everyone to be angry and then probably to end up being wrong after the fact. Michael Keaton, Heath Ledger, Ben Affleck, Robert Pattinson, like the world decried all four of those, and then it was just like, oh, our bad, we were wrong.
I mean, yeah, they're right about Clooney though, right?
He's still a great Bruce Wayne, dang it.
Yeah,
I was going to say, even that, I don't know how much of that was Clooney's fault. Like, I don't know how much he could have helped to that.
It reminds me, actually, I feel sorry for Henry Cavill because I think he's been given short shrift as Spider-Man, as Superman. I mean, because I think he did it. I think he was incredible, but just was not given enough to do. And it's like they've pushed him aside. And I think he could have given a lot more. I thought he had the presence for that role.
You know what I find exciting about the next generation coming up, though, too, is that now that we're 20 years into this golden age of comic book movies, I think you're legitimately going to be getting into younger and up and coming filmmakers who really were raised on these movies, you know, who really were fans and are now taking over properties and can legitimately say, I was influenced by these early days. Where, you know, when you handed something over to Raimi was a Marvel fan, you know, but I don't know how much Bryan Singer knew about the X-Men versus that was just a gig for him to take on, you know. I don't think Richard Donner grew up reading Superman, but he made a tremendous Superman movie. I do think we're going to see some really comic accurate transitions, you know, from some really rabid comic book fans. Now that sort of, not that it was a blatant stigma, but comics weren't as cool in the 70s and 80s, you know, and now it's the driving force of pop culture. And I think it's going to shape the types of stories that are told. You know, I mean, the new Raimi is out there somewhere, and I think he or she is going to be found in a superhero movie.
I mean, it's the same way that's happened with video games, right? Where like a whole generation has grown up with video games, and we've seen that genre move forward in a lot of ways because people are now in control of studios and things that were immersed in it. And before there was just this big stigma that like, it's not a career, it's not this, it's whatever, it's basic things. And now we see that all this stuff is being transitioned to movies and film now. That's a whole other thing, right? Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like comics, and especially now too, because the studios have shown they're willing to be a little experimental and they're bringing in all these characters. I mean, the fact that we have an America Chavez in the MCU now is, you know, is amazing. But you're just going to keep going down the list of new characters or side characters, and it opens up more possibilities for those filmmakers to find someone they really identify with and just jump all in. It doesn't have to be Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America. You know,
yeah.
It can be
We're now at a point where Reed Richards can get introduced as a throwaway in a Doctor Strange sequel.
Agreed.
Spoiler.
What? Yeah, sorry.
I said earlier today on Twitter, if the X-Men eventually / finally coming into the MCU doesn't mean that I eventually get either a Jubilee movie or TV show, then what the hell are we even doing here?
Oh,
yes,
that's happening.
They need to do a decent Jubilee character in the films and not waste the character like they have done beforehand.
Yes.
Have I struck upon the ultimate Jubilee group in this meeting right now? This
huge.
is
Oh,
amazing.
with me, yeah, 100%.
Oh my God, I'm always so alone.
Oh, tremendous
Oh,
fan.
this is amazing.
She's
Oh, this is
outstanding.
wonderful.
She's
spectacular, even as a vampire. I don't even
Oh,
care.
I love the
That's it.
Vampire
Yeah.
Jubilee. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
I have
awesome.
a wall over here that is all framed comic books, and it alternates. There's a variant cover, a cover with Jubilee on it, variant cover, a cover with Jubilee on it, just all
Nice.
across my wall.
Brilliant.
Applause.
And I'll quickly add that I thought that America Chavez was fantastic, that character in the Doctor Strange film. I loved that character. I thought that was really well done.
Agreed. I wish I would have seen more of her and her backstory, because that's what's part of what's so cool about her. But, you know, I'm also not going to be the dude that's like, how dare you put her in a movie and make her like one of 8 characters? Like, it's okay.
I think there's going to be more of her to come. I think she's going to be important in the story going ahead that they're probably going into. Otherwise, why would you bring a character that's so important as that in the Marvel universe? Why would you bring that just in as a side character? I think there's more to her, to be honest, in my
There
opinion.
seemed to be a lot with her parents as well that didn't get answered. Like, I think that she said that her parents were opened into like another multiverse, and that question never got answered. So.
Yeah.
To circle it back around to Raimi,
Yep.
this is how far we've come in 20 short years. Like 20 years in the landscape of movie making and storytelling is kind of a blip, you know. And we're talking about a movie where we all went through our memories of seeing Spider-Man and we were just impressed to see that he looked accurate, you know. And now we're like, well, America Chavez is jumping through multiverses, and you know, it's crazy how fast we've evolved and this genre has evolved. And you know, there's been hits and misses that have helped shape the road for sure, but it's remarkable where we are now. I don't think that can be overstated. You know, the sheer number of superhero properties that are existing and are still good. We're not flooding the market with mediocrity. It's still really impressive.
Even just the small. Go on, Rob.
Oh, I was just going to say, I got a kick out of it. This is mild spoilers for the very end of Eternals, but I got a kick out of we're at the point where the end credits reveal scene is Pip the Troll. Like, that's how far we've come, that our big reveal is like, oh, Pip the Troll is around now.
Very true.
What I was going to say now.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
It's hard to follow up Pip the Troll.
It really is. It really is. All I was going to say, what it was, is just to come back to the Spider-Man issue of it all. Even in that, it's amazing how far the Spider-Man franchise just on its own has come over that time, because since that first Raimi film, we've now got, you know, the incredible Spider-Verse film and the follow-ups that they're making. And I believe they've got one of the Japanese TV version from the late 70s. That character is going to be in the next Spider-Verse film, allegedly, as well. What is it? Is it Takeya Yamashiro? Is it, Sean? Is that it?
I believe so. I wouldn't swear to it, but I believe so. That sounds about right. I know he's a motocross rider, and he's not quite Peter Parker, the photographer. But Lord Miller said at CinemaCon that two-part movie is going to have 240 characters. So I don't doubt for a minute that he's going to show up at some point.
Yeah,
that's going to be madness when they fully unleash that.
Wow, it's so.
And don't forget the Spump, the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters, Marv. You can't leave out the Madam Webs and the Kraven the Hunters of them.
I'm just happy we're getting Spider-Woman in some form. Please, Lord, hope that it's Jessica Drew, and if that, I feel I'm always tentative until I actually like see some kind of logo or like, hey, we're in production or something, because we've been burned so many times over the years.
Sure.
But I want to see I want to see that character. That character could be so great in this universe. Is that what they're calling it, by the way? Is it what is the official term for the Sony Marvel universe thing?
It's the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters. The acronym is SPUMP.
That's new to me, but I like it. I'll endorse that.
The SPUMP.
Just watch how you say it.
Yeah, you gotta be really careful. But they have access to, without exaggeration, 700 characters that are affiliated with Spider-Man that they can use according to their agreement with Marvel, between Sony and Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
only two that they can't. There's only two that they can't. It's like Kingpin and one other. I forget who the other one is that they can't have access to. I can't remember who it is.
But if they're going to have access to a slew of characters, Spider-Man's gallery is the one to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and when you go through the list, because it's available somewhere, there's a PDF of it online if you just search for it. It's a staggering number of like characters you just wouldn't even know. You know, like there's people like the Enforcers and characters that would be familiar to everybody. And then there's just like any sort of organization that was mentioned at some point over the decades. Like they could branch off and make, if they wanted to, a Stiltman movie essentially. and the way they're rolling out El Muerto, I mean, maybe that's going to happen.
Yeah, Bad Bunny, way to go.
It just occurred to me they could make an animated Superior Foes of Spider-Man movie, and how good would that be after what we saw from Into the Spider-Verse?
Very true.
Yeah. And also another thing that shows how far we've come with the Spider-Verse was how they did with No Way Home as well, which, the way that they brought all those characters from the other Spider-Man films, including the actual individual Spider-Man characters. I think they did really well to pull out the best bits of those interpretations to bring into the film as well. So when you got Toby in there, and you got Andrew in there, and you've got Alfred Molina in there, and everybody else. I mean, I thought Jamie Foxx killed it in comparison to how he was in the Amazing Spider-Man beforehand. So I think they've done really well with that as well, and that's shown how far we've come in the world of superhero films as well.
Yeah,
I think Kevin Feige very much wants to do reclamation projects where he wants to look at things that weren't beloved, and he wants to give us a reason to go back and love it. Like Endgame played so heavily into Thor: The Dark World that we were like, was that better than I think it was? Maybe I should. Shang-Chi really made Iron Man 3 look a lot better in retrospect. And no matter what your opinion of the various Spider-Man movies that Mark Webb or Sam Raimi did, I think Kevin Feige just took all the elements and was like, everything about these is great. No matter what side you're on, no matter what you think of either franchise, love all of it. I think he's just so into taking things that people thought like, maybe that wasn't for me, and making us question whether that was ever actually the case or not.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's a bit like going to the latest Doctor Strange film again. With those characters that they've brought back from other, from now that they've got all the Fox things back, the Fox properties that they had. It's like like I was saying before we started, with the Anson Mount of playing Black Bolt, for instance, and then you've got Patrick Stewart reprising the role of Professor X, and then you've got spoiler. I mean, I've already spoiled enough already. Krasinski as as Mr. Fantastic. It's like they've lent into that and they've given you a really good interpretation of them. Although my irritation is there's not enough of them in that film, which niggles at me in a way, because they are such good actors that if you gave them just about another 5 minutes or so, I think that sequence would have worked better if you'd have filled those out a bit more, because there's no way that they've got Krasinski in for a role like that as a one-off. So my call here is that very soon we'll get Fantastic Four announced.
Yeah, I can't argue against that fact. And, with John Watts stepping away from that project makes me almost kind of believe that he was a placeholder until they were able to reveal that Krasinski was playing Reed Richards, in this movie, and that then now he'll step over and helm and potentially star in, that Fantastic Four. And I even think that Watts might have just done it like completely amicably as a favorite to Feige. I wonder if, because it never really made a ton of sense for John Watts to move from the Spider-Man franchise to another massive property like Fantastic Four. Marvel doesn't necessarily, or hasn't yet to this point, shared their directors, except the Russos, but the Russos transitioning from Civil War to the Avengers movies made enough sense at that point.
Yeah.
And John Watts, for anyone who was paying attention, was just burned out by the end of No Way Home, and totally understandably why. Like, that's a massive project to take on. So I could see him transitioning into, if he was going to stay at Marvel, a smaller sort of origin story, but Fantastic Four is going to have to be a behemoth right out of the gate.
Yeah.
The way you introduce that family. So I was always surprised that he was the person selected for it, and it makes a lot more sense that he's stepping away.
Agreed.
I think he'd be good as an advisor, perhaps, because I always used to think that, but then again, I've got the memory of all these comics that I've read and cartoons from back in the day, where you'd have the Fantastic Four suddenly appearing with Spider-Man or vice versa. There's always been a link in my head between those properties anyway, because they were the first, they were the out of the gate properties from Marvel anyway, so they've got that history to them.
For sure. That's another great example of we now live in a world where Matt Murdock shows up in a scene.
And we all
like,
mark out for it.
And we're like, I guess a Daredevil's part of this world now. That's great. Fantastic.
But there shows Kevin Feige's, wonderful ability to, so they've got these properties that they can use, and he's worked out that person is perfect in this role, because I still think that Daredevil was the better of the Marvel Netflix series. I think that was the standout from all of them. I like a lot of what they did, but I just think that one had something really special, and Charlie Cox killed it in that role. And I think that's what Kevin Feige is really good at noticing, that he's looking at these properties and he might be thinking, well, that might not have worked in that role, but this person definitely worked in that role. So perhaps he's doing a bit of that now, when we're seeing that with him utilizing Charlie and Patrick Stewart and these people, and in some cases recasting here where it didn't work initially and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, based on the movie that we came here to talk about and what you're saying right there, Kevin Feige had the foresight to go, nobody wants anybody besides J.K. Simmons to play Jonah Jameson. Just bring him back. No one's going to take anybody but him. It's fine.
So true.
Yeah,
so true.
Agreed. He's so indicative of the tone, like the tone of this movie, because like what you were talking about before, where it leans into the camp a little bit. Is, I mean, this character doesn't work in almost, like, yes, he worked in when they brought him in, everyone popped for him in Far From Home, right? But it was because it's like a one-off thing. He doesn't work unless the rest of the world supports a ridiculous character like that, and he works so well. And it's just it's so weird, because there are parts of this movie that I'm like, God, that line is corny. God, that line, why is he saying that? It's so weird. It just stands out so much. And then you get to another scene and he's, get the pictures, Parker, and blah, 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 this is talking all the thing. And it's just, you just buy into it. And you're like, yeah, all right, whatever. You just forgive it. It's such a weird, that character captures it.
Yeah, I was going to say, he captures that character so perfectly, doesn't he, though? Simmons is like, he's the one character where he is the right level of over the top out there that you have with J. Jonah Jameson, because it's always been like that. Even when you read the comics, you'll see all the speech bubbles and the words will be enormous because it's like the shouting, the speech bubbles at you with that character. And he pulled it off wonderfully.
One of the best things about a movie is when you watch it and you can just feel inside of you how much fun the actor is having in that role. And you watch the first Spider-Man movie, anything in the Raimi trilogy that J.K. Simmons is on the screen for, and you're just like, this guy is having the time of his life.
Yeah.
Because you have an actor who can do this and then, go off to shoot some scenes for Oz the next day. And it's just like, all right, man, I guess he's just living his best life doing every version of everything.
Absolutely. And then, but like we're going back to the casting again, aren't we? Where everybody was perfect in their role. Although I will say what Sean said, actually, I think he's right that in a sense, Willem Dafoe was incredible in the first one, but in the latest one, it's like a growth in the character and a growth in his ability, in his acting as well, where he's taken that character to another role, a whole nother level. But yeah, it's all about the casting, and I think they've pulled it off perfectly. Kirsten Dunst, as MJ and everything.
Well, one thing that Defoe doesn't have to do in No Way Home is establish. You already know who Norman is. He's got this history of being manipulative. You're almost, when he's at feast, and he's acting like he's the wounded puppy, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then when it drops, it's enormous. It's fantastic. If we lament anything, it's that Toby and that version of Norman Osborn didn't get a rematch fight. Essentially, I would like to see them go toe to toe just for a little bit. But it felt like the Goblin, I don't know if that was due to reshoots, but like he just kind of shows up at the end of the battle. Like there's a great bit of moment where the Spider-Men are sort of trading punches with the different heroes, and that's one of the thrills to me of No Way Home, is getting a chance to say like, oh, Toby's Spider-Man got to fight the Lizard, like that's really cool.
Yeah.
Or oh, Tom's Spider-Man got caught by Sandman, like that's really wild. And I would have liked to seen, a little bit more of the Goblin show up, but
I think that they did that. It may have something to do with reshoots, you're right, but I think they wanted the Green Goblin to feel like the final boss of that movie. Like you have all these kind of underling villains, but the Green Goblin is the boss fight.
Yeah.
You're going back to computer games here, aren't you, Rob? It's like
Green Goblin is Bowser.
Yeah, you're at this level.
Yeah. And
I wish Andrew had a line. I wish Andrew had a line that just said like, Andrew should have had a line that was like, my Goblin looked way sillier than you do. How come you don't look so weird? Mine looked really weird.
That's amazing. Well, and Martin mentioned Kirsten Dunst as MJ, and one of the things I was not a fan of Dunst's MJ from like when I first saw it. Like it was fine, but like I was never like I don't know, it just didn't click for me. And so when I was going into it, I was kind of prepared to have that same feeling, and I came away actually very much appreciating her in a different way, mostly from her scenes with Toby, because there's like two key scenes between them throughout this movie, where especially one where they're at the house, like they're at his house, and she was just like left her dad yelling at her and everything out of the house, and they have a conversation. And then later on, there's another conversation where they're in the street, because that's when he realizes like she's not acting yet and stuff like that. And there's a sense that like Holland has done a really good job of this, but Raimi captured a genuineness in that version of Peter Parker that I don't think has been touched. And it's really impressive because if Toby is not all the way listening, she's having reactions to him just like listening to her, like even through while she's talking. It's really impressive. Like I came away going like, okay, maybe I was wrong. Like maybe I shortchanged her when I first watched this, because there's some really great stuff between them going on. So I wanted to give her props because I felt bad. I was like self-conflicted when I was watching.
No, I 100% agree. I've always thought like, oh, she's definitely one of the weaker points in the original trilogy. And then when I rewatched the 2002 film today, I was like, I like her much more than I swear I used to.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
And it's definitely her performance, because I don't think her character is written great, but her performance is a lot better than I think I used to give it credit for.
I can't understand it. And one of the things that bothered me about the first Raimi film, if probably the main thing that bothered me about the main Raimi film, is that if you're going to start with Mary Jane, fine, start with Mary Jane. Although I think they should have started with Gwen. But why they started with Mary Jane and then leaned so heavily into the most famous Gwen Stacy element, which is you put her on the top of a bridge. Like when I first saw that, and I was being nitpicky fanboy, but I was like, why did they do that? How come they took MJ and put her into the significant Gwen Stacy scene? And then the more I thought about it after the fact, I was like, then if you're going to put her up there, then you should just kill her off, because while she's an important element of part 2, because of the way that it's written, by the time you get to 3 is really just people are coming back because they're part of the franchise now, and I kind of give credit to superhero movies at this point now that they are okay with cut and bait, and moving on to new characters if the other people don't necessarily fit into the franchise. It's not always just like, well, we're doing the next so and so we're going to bring everybody back because you recognize these faces. But in the Raimi trilogy, by the time you got to 3, it really was like everyone needed screen time because that's just the way sequels were made at that point. And it always bothered me that they kept the main love interest around when one of the things that Spider-Man fans appreciate the most is the loss that's affiliated with Gwen Stacy and how it would have affected Peter going into 2. It would have given him a true motivation for not wanting to be the hero anymore, and throwing the suit away. So some of those elements I always felt like could have been worked out a little bit better on the script.
It's odd to say this about something that Sam Raimi did, but do you think killing Mary Jane or killing a love interest in this franchise would have been too dark for what this franchise was shooting for, maybe?
Probably. Yeah, I think so. I think that there are things that comic book movies can do now because the audience is more attuned to these shocks. Yeah, I think you're 100% right in saying that.
I mean, I was wrecked and amazed, in oh my God, Andrew Garfield.
Amazing too.
Blanking on his name, but Andrew Garfield's. I was shocked when they kill Gwen there. Spoiler, I know for that movie, but like when they kill Gwen there, like that still rocked me. It was the way it was executed and everything. That hit me.
Yeah, that's such a brutal death scene as well.
Oh,
terrible.
My God, it's the sound.
Yeah,
too. It's the way they execute that.
Break. Yeah.
Oh my God, it still wrecks me. So maybe at the time, I think for sure, probably too, but I think to Sean's point, it was weird that they combined those things. And so if you are going to go that route, I was like, well, then why? My biggest pet peeve with Marvel sometimes when it comes to Spider-Man is that like, it's okay to wreck his life, but you don't have to wreck everything about his life. People typically need at least 1 or 2 things of stability to like be sane, right? And make it through all these things. And so they sometimes refuse to just let them be happy. Like it's okay to actually have something in your life like happy, especially like Spider-Man is like one of the most tragic characters around, right? He's had so many things happen to him. He's like had to go around another person's body and like, you know what I mean? Like so many things. So let's develop a relationship, and you can still have so many interesting conflicts with people together. Like you can actually make conflict. And sometimes it's Hollywood does this thing of like, we want to, the will or won't they? And that gets very boring very quickly, if not executed correctly. So at the end of this, it's such a great scene. And then they do that little swerve of like, but I have to turn away for a hero. And I was like, why? You were being such a dumbass. Like, why do you have to do that? You can actually do both, Peter. You're a scientist. Like, you're supposed to be smart. You can do both things. It's okay. Like, I don't know. I saw that and was like, really? Like, really, we got to do that? Because then in 2, right, we spent so much time on that. And I was like, I would rather just see them develop a real relationship over the course of a movie instead of this parroting apart thing. And I think that feeds into Sean's point of like, by 3, you're just like, okay, it's too, they never really went one way or the other with it. So then you just kind of end up in the middle and nothing's developed. So, yeah.
Well, the problem with 3 is that there were too many problems in the way with that film anyway, where you had pressure from certain people to do this sort of thing, that sort of thing, and the other. So you feel bad in a way for Sam Raimi, because he's being told, no, we want this in there and we want that in there, and essentially he was making a film that he didn't really want to make. In essence,
that happens. Especially in franchises that are making the amount of money that those Spider-Man movies are making. And it's worth pointing out that I believe that Spider-Man 3 is the most successful of them all financially.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Of the 3 Raimis, anyway. The Marvel ones have now surpassed it, but
because they had Venom, baby.
Yeah, kids love Venom.
People love Venom. Everyone except Sam Raimi loves Venom.
We were all there day 1 to see that 70s show guy play Venom.
That's still such an odd casting, even all these
casting
years
is so bizarre.
No shade on Topher. Like, Topher Grace is awesome. He's been in other stuff. He's been great. So that's no shade, but just such an odd pairing.
It really is. At least I can understand what Tom Hardy is doing now. Like it's a very unusual choice to do Venom as a Buster Keaton physical comedy, but if you're gonna do it, and he's committed to it, 100%. But whatever they were trying to do in 3, they just didn't get it. They didn't get it.
It's funny you mention that, because it's just reminded me that when Spider-Man 3 came out, or was coming out, and they were advertising the whole thing with Venom, I had this image and I thought, oh, great, we're going to get the alien costume saga in live action. And it was so far from that as well, but unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't remember the part in the comic books where Peter grew his hair out over his face and went jazz dancing?
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah, Todd McFarlane drew it. It looked great.
Oh my God. That would have been amazing. Oh my Lord.
Right?
Can we get a variant of that, please? Yeah, that would have been fantastic.
McFarlane Peter with long hair over his face.
Those scenes are so bad, but then it's one of those things that they always get a pass, because I know Raimi didn't want to do the thing anyway, and I always view them more as a middle finger to the studio than I do actual scenes, So
honestly, my take on Spider-Man 3 is it gets so much crap for the emo Peter Parker stuff, but you watch Spider-Man 3 and then you watch this movie and it's like, what from Spider-Man 3 wouldn't fit in this movie? It's the same exact tone. I don't understand why people got to 3 and was like, well, no, this is stupid. Is this stupider than the scene on the rooftop where like the Green Goblin smacks Spider-Man in the head and then leans on a skylight? Like, these movies are all about having weird, silly visuals.
Yeah.
The dialogue in Spider-Man 3 is like incredible as well. Like, he's just like, I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye. I think that's in Spider-Man 3. There's a bit as well where it's like, you want forgiveness, get religion. That's a great line. Just the dialogue is just ramped up by 100 in that one.
I like playing a fun game of all the different roles that Gwen Stacy has in Spider-Man 3. Like, when we first meet her, she's in Peter's class. Like, she's the competitive classmate who's smarter than he is. Later on, she's a fashion model, getting her picture taken for like photocopiers. Then at some point, she's so prevalent that she, hosts the Spider-Man fan appreciation parade. There's all these different things that they keep attaching to Gwen. So that's the worst dialogue ever in any film of all time. When Eddie Brock shows up and they're like, "Who is that hanging up there?" And he's like, "I think it's Gwen. Oh, by the way, I'm dating your daughter." It's like,
yeah.
What?
Yeah, that was rough. Yeah.
She's hanging for her life, for God's sakes. That's not the time, Eddie.
Oh my God, so true.
So the different Spider-Man films that they've made since, can you think of any areas where they might have where they've gone really right with the films and some areas where they've gone wrong with the films?
I'm not a massive fan of Ned, to be honest. I don't know what you guys think about him.
Ned is exactly the type of character that I was talking about earlier that would have been terrific for Homecoming and then didn't need to stay around.
100%.
Didn't necessarily need to be a big part of. Hey, listen.
Hey, apparently he's going to become the next villain. I've heard.
No, stop.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Stop it. Stop.
Yeah.
No, stop.
That's only going to
I
happen
love
if
Ned.
Marvel go away from this.
Yeah.
I think I love Ned because I see myself in Ned. if I was the like friend of a superhero, I'd be exactly like Ned. Like I would be exactly like him. Questionable.
And that's why he was perfect for Homecoming.
Sure.
You know,
Yes.
like he was the counterpart to this kid who was suddenly an Avenger. And it was so earnest. And then I just felt like the other times, like from Far From Home and No Way Home, they weren't better in No Way Home, you know, but now all of a sudden he can open portals.
I think I always compare him to, I think he probably gets a little bit of a pass from me. One, because yes, I see myself in him, but two, I just do not like, and again, no shade to the actor, but I just do not like Flash in the new movies. Never, never
totally
resounded
agree.
for me. So because I'm always seeing him, that's the one that's like, man, it sticks out to me all the time. So I'll probably just ignore other things, but yeah, it just doesn't. Even the one in this Spider-Man, in the first one, is better because that's like, okay, he's kind of a bully, he treats him like a jerk, he's kind of this and that, he's the, you know, he's the popular guy, like all that comes across and you're like, okay, like yeah, it's bare bones and it needs development obviously, but still I know that's Flash. And then I watch these movies and I'm just like, that never comes, I can't buy that guy as Agent Venom later. You know what I mean? Like I can't buy it. I can't buy that guy.
Like you could buy Joe Manganiello as turning into Agent Venom eventually, getting a conscience, becoming his own hero. Like weird, dorky fanboy Flash. Yeah, it's like, no, you're not going to be a hero. It's not going to happen for you.
But what Sean said though about, you know, Ned being perfect for Homecoming, it's almost like he would be like us if we were best friends of a superhero. Say if we were best friends of Batman, if he went out to the toilet, we'd be there fidgeting and playing with all of his gadgets, and that's Ned to a T.
There's just a simple visual gag when they're in his room just sort of brainstorming what to do next, and they eventually cut back and Ned's wearing the mask, because of course you'd grab the mask and put it on. It's like 100%. So
I mean, grown-up Paul Rudd grabbed the shield when Chris Evans was in the bathroom. Like, we're all gonna do it. Like, no matter what age. I feel like it doesn't matter if you're 60 or you're 5. You're gonna grab it. You're like, yeah, I want to try that. That looks cool.
Of course.
That looks super sweet. I actually got a jet. I gotta come back, but this has been amazing. I really wish I could just sit on here and talk more because this has been so fun. I really appreciate everyone inviting me on.
Okay, Matt, do you want to quickly tell everybody how to get hold of you and where to find you and everything and all about Comic Book Nation?
Yeah, of course. You can check out our Comic Book Nation podcast live on Twitch on Fridays at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And then, of course, we are on Sunday mornings on Paramount Plus as well as part of ET Live. And then you can catch all my fun theatrics, typically just talking about Olaf and wrestling and comics on Twitter at Matt Aguilar CB. And of course, you can catch all my articles on comicbook.com.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for this. Take care.
No, you guys have a great day.
Cheers. Bye. Right. So
It makes me feel better because the last time I talked with you, Marv, I was the one who had to jet early. Yes, I'm in for the long haul today. I don't have to run away this time.
You are, but I think Sean's busy today, aren't you, Sean?
I'm going to bounce. Yeah. But I mean, if any other topics you want to go over before I scoot off?
I don't know what to say. Have you got any, here we go, bit of advert promotion for yourself. Have you got any sort of like stories that you know or anecdotes to do with these Sam Raimi films that you found out during your research?
So much. I spent a lot of time on the first Raimi film because, you know, as we know, it's the one that started it all. And I got a chance to speak with John Dykstra and figure out a lot of the stuff that they did with visual effects to make him look convincing, and the way that they did comparative shots between a stuntman trying to pull off even just wall crawling. They were really trying to figure out the physics of bringing the motion that Spider-Man does in a comic book to live action, and then visual effects where they were able to get to, and apparently they screened both of them for the studio executives. They had a fully visual VFX driven Spider-Man walking up the wall, and again, because he's completely masked, it's easier to do it because the human face is one of the most difficult things for them to do at that time. And then they had a stuntman do it, and they said that the studio executives couldn't tell the difference between like who was the stuntman and who was the visual effect, and that gave them the confidence to do as much as they could in the live action. But the person who I enjoyed speaking to the most was the costume designer, Jim Atchison, who worked on all three of the Raimi films and got very candid about the distaste for Spider-Man 3 and the black costume, and how no one in there, he really believed that the black suit, by the time they got to that point, should have been completely a visual effect, a VFX. And the fact that they had to just do the black suit version of what the existing costume was bothered him to no end. He also tells some really great stories about by the time he got hired on to the movie, they'd already hired out a creative team to do Goblin's mask, and he hated it, like just hates everything about the shell of the Goblin mask. And in fact, it's funny, you were bringing up the rooftop scene. He said when he sat down to watch that movie opening weekend or with an audience, that was the scene that he feared the most, because he just knew how goofy it was going to look, because Willem Dafoe had to speak through that, with the mask, the little mouth that opened, and he's like, we didn't solve how to have Willem Dafoe give a performance through that mask. But he talked at length about the time crunch that they were on for that movie, and designing the suit, and needing it to fit a body type, because they had up to that, you could have up to 15 different stuntmen who always have to be wearing the suit and look exactly like Toby, so that you don't know who's in the shot essentially in that moment. And they were really waffling about who they were going to cast, and Jim just kept saying to Sam, like, I need to know what it's going to look like, what the main character is going to look like. So at one point he tells this great story about how he was so fed up with Sam being so indecisive and going back and forth that he filled a room with 20 men in Speedos of all different body types. And he brings Sam Raimi in and he just says, point at one. Like, point, what is he going to look like? And he said Raimi was, in his suit and couldn't look more flustered, and essentially just points at a guy who was pretty ripped, like a bodybuilder type thing. And James Atchison's like, great, I'm going to go forward from that point on and design it that way. And then he goes and chooses cast Tobey Maguire, who is this, string beanpole of an actor. And so, but he tells great stories about them not realizing that Spider-Man's face is covered for completely, and how do you have an actor in that suit for the amount of time that they have to be. And that's where we see pictures now of like the eyes being taken out, and where Tom Holland's sipping on a straw to drink something, and these are all things that they had to solve in the moment. And I love all the behind the scenes stuff about that. And so there's a ton of great stories for the Raimi films and the web films, and then all through the Marvel stuff in the book. So, but I love that story about Raimi pointing at dudes in Speedos. Classic.
So when you were starting to come up with came up with the idea for doing the book, what was the initial? How did you plan out how you were going to write the book and everything? How does it go? Do you do the research and then write the book? How did you plan that out?
The first story that I wanted to explore, which made me realize initially the book was going to be about versions of Spider-Man movies that never came to pass. I was going to do some stuff on the Jim Cameron one. I was going to do some stuff on the Cannon films, and all that stuff ends up going in there. But the story of Andrew Garfield going to Comic-Con and surprising the fans in the audience, where he takes off the mask and gives that extremely heartfelt speech. I go back and rewatch that speech, every couple of months, essentially, because I just find it to be so uplifting. And as I started noodling through, like, what could I write about from Spider-Man's standpoint, I was like, I want to know the story behind that day. You know, like who came up with that idea? How did they pull it off? Where did that store-bought costume come from? You know, what was the vibe before it and after it? So I got a chance to talk to Avi and Matt Tolmack, who is the producer on all the Raimi films and then the web films, and Amy Pascal and Andrew about and just got the behind the scenes of that story. And once all of those came together, and that became like my sample chapter that I shopped around to publishers, I was like, now I'm going to single out all the things that I think are really interesting to Spider-Man fans and try to get the stories behind them. So I have a whole section about Shailene Woodley's Mary Jane Watson and what happened, you know, why that fell apart essentially. And with the MCU ones, I get into just the ways that they wanted it to be different from what came before it. You know, it always became like, I wanted to study the evolution of this character and what did all these different people learn at all these different stages to get us to the point of where we are now. And what I didn't realize when I started doing that is that I didn't even know that No Way Home was going to be a thing. And so now you get to the point where you have a movie where the three generations of Spider-Man come together. And so I love the fact that this book tells the story of their stories and then sort of culminates with them sharing the screen. So
yeah, there's a strange thing about that where, so you've got that with this new book that you've got coming out, and then something similar happened with the previous book that you brought out. They released the Snyder Cut, and all of a sudden the book came out and they released the Snyder Cut.
And they released, yes. So I'm going to write about Peace in the Middle East next. It's my third book.
You have the magic touch. Go for it.
I must. I must.
I'm going to write the story
Snyder...
about the time everybody just found $1 million.
The Snyder Cut one blew my mind. You know, like the idea that I was just intrigued by that story, and I was intrigued by what happened to Zach, and I was intrigued by his fan base fighting so hard to realize it and to get it recognized in some way, shape, or form. And I always intended that to have an open-ended conclusion of just like, if this movie ever comes to pass, these are probably the people who made it happen. And then literally as I'm getting up to the point of having to turn the manuscript into the publisher, HBO Max reveals that they're going to announce it. And so I basically said to the publisher, like, you got to give me another month. You know, you got to kick it back, because now I got to change a lot and interview the people who won and give them their victory lap. So it was a good problem to have.
So going back to the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, was everybody in the staff, the crew, were they all set in stone from the off, or are there some stories about people that came and went in that as well?
No, everyone who Sam sort of brought on board was on board with the production, you know, but at that point for all of them, it was a job. You know, they didn't realize what they were necessarily putting together. And I don't think that they quite fully understood the significance of the character or the global popularity of the character. It wasn't until that movie sort of came out that they realized what they'd tapped into. Although, you know, Sony will say that they were really excited all of these studios are really excited when they have a property that could potentially become a franchise. But one of the stories that blows my mind, you know, to this day, I'll never quite process it, is that Marvel was trying to license their characters out to these different studios and get these films made. And when Sony came around with their offer that they wanted to purchase the rights to Spider-Man, Marvel was just coming out of a bankruptcy and was desperate for an infusion of cash. And they said, hey, we'll give you everyone that we have the rights to for $25 million. And this, you know, would have been everyone who you see in the MCU right now. The only ones that they couldn't give were the ones who were at Fox at that point, which was the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. But everyone else could have gone to Sony. And Sony said, nah, we're not, we don't want, we only see value in Spider-Man. So they took Spider-Man for 10 million, but they could have had the entire ensemble for 25. And the guy's name is John Calley. He was the executive at Sony at that time. And I guarantee that dude wakes up every day and just thinks, good, what did I do? What did I do? How did I let that go?
I have to say, though, I think the rest of us are all very thankful that he did.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, it's very true.
But everything about the first Spider-Man film is absolutely perfect. So, you know, you've got the great work of, you know, the Sam Raimi at his best with the directing, and then the music as well is incredible. The music, and I love the points in the film where the music leans into the old theme tune from back in the day from the comics that we used to do. I always love those bits in the film. There's sort of a magic to the music itself as well that fits with the film perfectly.
For sure, but I got to give a hat tip to Michael Giacchino and the way that he pulled the 1960s theme into the orchestral moments from Homecoming. That gave me such a rise. I think, and maybe you guys agree, the reason why Spider-Man 2 is preferred to me is because it just had Raimi had more confidence. He now realized that like people were digging his interpretation of the character, and so that's where you get the Dr. Octopus, birth in the surgery room, and like the fact that Sam Raimi can do a 3-minute Peter with mops, joke. He just has the ability to do that, and he loves the goofy physical comedy of that, and the ability to keep bringing Bruce Campbell back and let him increase his part. Bruce might have my favorite line, when he changes or gives Spider-Man his name at the wrestling match.
Oh yeah,
the
definitely.
human spider, that sucks. It's great. It's just great.
And then he brings him back in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness as well.
He does. Yeah.
Oh,
we all sat through the credits.
Yeah.
That end bit was brilliant with Bruce. That's brilliant. That's great.
He gives the Evil Dead laugh into the camera, and it's like, yep, okay, that's good. I'm here for that.
Ash, thanks. I agree with you, Sean. I think the second one is actually better and I can't put my finger on exactly why, but there's something about it that has a quality that the first one didn't quite get. And
we talked about how this movie, the 2002 movie, leans into the campiness. And it does. And I think a lot of times, honestly, to this movie's detriment, it does get a little over goofy, a little over campy. And I feel like in the second one, there's definitely still moments like that, but it has definitely reeled itself back in and feels more, the stakes feel higher. Everything feels a little bit more, I don't want to say dire, but serious. Like the train scene, like, can you picture the train scene in this movie? It wouldn't have fit. That would have felt too momentous for anything else going on here. Like, we don't have time for a train scene. We have to have a Macy Gray concert. Hold on now. So you get to Spider-Man 2 and you can do the train scene, and you look at that scene and it's like, yes, that is the character of Spider-Man that I've read my whole life, just going above and beyond what he should be able to do because he has to save people.
Yep. Very true.
Best thing about the Macy Gray scene, though, is the Stan Lee cameo.
That's fair.
Is that his first cameo? Is it in all of Marvel?
No, he was in X-Men before this, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you go far enough back, he was in some of the wasn't he in the trial of the Incredible Hulk back in the day as well?
He was. Yes, he was. Yeah, sitting in the jury box.
Yeah, absolutely. He's all over the place. And what's that cartoon that he's in? Oh, I can't remember now. He's in a cartoon, isn't he? That's not not a Marvel property, isn't it? I can't remember what it is. It's a famous film now. With
so there's an anecdote on the script before Raimi got his hands on David Koepp's version, where Stan was pushing a version of a screenplay by John Brancato and Ted Newsom. And it was very similar to, it had a lot of similar elements to what Raimi ended up in to the point where there was going to be a wrestling scene, but they had scripted Hulk Hogan into the scene. And they were pretty confident that they could get Hulk Hogan for it because Stan Lee was super popular with wrestlers because of his connection to Lou Ferrigno and, just the circles that he ran in New York City. And I just would have loved to see Hulk Hogan in a Spider-Man movie. That would have been so great. Based on what he did in Rocky.
But would it have been better than Bonesaw?
No, probably not. Bonesaw is terrific.
Bonesaw's great. Savage's voice, man. Like, no one's ever going to have a voice like him.
Right. Very true.
We need a Bone Storm movie next. Let's get that sorted out.
Sony will do it. Don't you say it out loud. Sony will do it.
Not that they should, but they will.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but they keep announcing all these things, and sometimes we don't see these films, like Black Sable and all those characters. They've not had their films yet.
Yeah, like how many different times have they said, "Oh, we're going to do a Sinister Six movie. It's confirmed," and then nothing comes of that.
Well, I think they were trying for
it.
that at the end of the Amazing Spider-Man. You know, at the end of that, I think they were going towards that sort of level, and then that didn't work out. Obviously,
Sure, Drew Goddard was on tap to. He had a screenplay for it, and he was going to direct it.
Oh,
the problem is they tried to.
I didn't know that he was the one who was attached to it. Okay, that would have been. I was more interested to see it now.
Yeah, he would have directed it and had a script for it and everything too. The problem is they tried to build an entire universe in one movie.
Yeah,
and that's they lumped everything into Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Would you guys prefer to have an Amazing Spider-Man 3 or a Spider-Man 4?
Inherently, Amazing Spider-Man 3. I want more Andrew Garfield in that role. But if you told me that the rumors are true, and if there is a Spider-Man 4, it's going to be about Bruce Campbell being Mysterio, then I have pause. Then, I'll question whether I want that or not. But unless that is the story, I definitely want Amazing Spider-Man 3.
I think I'd have to agree with that. I do feel like No Way Home truly gave Toby closure. Whereas I feel like Andrew still got sort of short-shrifted. He had great moments in No Way Home, but that franchise got ripped out of his hands. And I would love to see him get one last great shot,
And he genuinely loves the character as well. You can tell so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That other one, I had to look it up, by the way. The other Stan Lee cameo in a film outside of Marvel is Big Hero 6.
Oh, right. That's true. Yes.
I thought that was a Marvel property, though. Like, it's not MCU, but I thought they did have Big Hero 6. I might be mistaken on that. I thought they were doing comics on that first.
That might be right.
Maybe. So, anyway, what do you see then coming in the future for the Spider-Man franchise, Sean?
I think eventually they're going to have a Spider-Man in the Sony universe. There's talk about them wanting to do a mix of very similar to what Marvel does right now, where they'll have some television properties on a streaming service that Sony is yet to launch. Sony is going to have a streaming service at some point. Everyone else has one. Warner Brothers has HBO Max, Disney has Disney Plus. Sony's going to have to do one to keep up, and they've tapped Lord and Miller to do. I think Silk is supposed to get a limited series. And I think you might see some characters that sort of pop up, in that format, the way that you're getting a Moon Knight show now or a Hawkeye show or something like that. But the Sony universe is going to need a Spider-Man. And I think because of the establishment of a multiverse, you can still have Tom Holland be the MCU Spider-Man, and audiences would accept the fact that, like, oh, there's just a different Spider-Man who's part of that universe. They haven't even scratched the surface of Miles Morales. Like, they could do a Miles trilogy that lasts 10 years, like there's still so much to do. And they're going to continue. Sony is never going to stop making these movies because Morbius didn't do great, but the two Venom movies made money. They really did. And until they can figure out a way to make a damn Sinister Six movie, because they're not going to give up, they're going to put everything into it. And if Craven comes around and does well, it's a vote of confidence for what they're doing. So I don't see Marvel getting Spider-Man back fully. I think so. Sony will hold on to him for as long as they possibly can. And I'd love to see them, introduce a television component and explore some characters that way. They'll continue to do animated features, and as long as they're still as creative as Into the Spider-Verse was, it's unlimited. There's plenty of place for imaginative storytellers to come over and explore Spider-Man's universe in animation. Like, who'd have thought we'd have had, if you're a Batman fan, that you'd have a Lego Batman movie, that explored that entire side. So it's really it's unlimited, the things that they can do. So
yep. I mean, in some ways, when I watched Into the Spider-Verse, I sort of thought, in a sense, that if they're able to lean into using Lord and Miller more often, in a sense, use them as their own version of Kevin Feige. In essence, I think they've got a really good team there. If they could, it's a bit like, it's almost like you need an overarching person who's got the plan there. And in this case, if you had Lord and Miller there, who obviously have got that scope and the ability to see and have ideas, because God, there's nothing like Into the Spider-Verse out there. That film is just, you've got these films and then you've got that film. So they've got the ability and the knowledge and the scope to be able to look at these different things. So if you had some people like them in charge, I think their films, their, you know, Spider-Verse, as they're calling it, or spunk, did you say?
Spunk. The spunk. Yes.
Thank you.
Come on,
Watching
get it
how
right.
I say that.
Yeah, it doesn't have the you know, the draw of the MCU. You know, you could say the MCU and everyone knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If
Or
you
the
went out into
DCEU.
conversations and brought up the spunk, you're going to get looked at oddly.
But yeah, if they had people like that actually in charge that had this vision, then I think they'd be in a completely different place than they are now.
Of course.
I think it's risky though, because we've seen so many different individual studios try to do the MCU and it doesn't work for anyone but the MCU. Universal wanted to do a Dark Monsters universe and it just fell flat on its face. The DCEU is much better off when they're doing properties that are unrelated to each other, because when they tried to make it an MCU of their own, it just didn't work. And Sony with Venom and Morbius, I mean, these aren't properties that seem like they're going to make a big universe anybody cares about. So I think Sony would be better off. And I agree, Lord and Miller, let them handle animated stuff. Let them do anything they want after Into the Spider-Verse. You give them control to do anything they want. But I think you just kind of make properties as they come to you. I don't think you worry about making your own MCU, because you don't have Kevin Feige and he's the only person with the track record to do this right now. Just make good properties with the talent that you have available.
Star Wars has to learn that too. And Star Wars is learning that the hard way as well. You know, Kathleen Kennedy is not that person. So they should just keep making, you know, individual type stuff that's not connected to the main trilogy. You know, the way that Rogue One had to be, and you know, even The Mandalorian is now, you know, showing connections to Clone Wars and things like that. Like, go far away, go do something completely different in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, you have a whole galaxy. It's far away. You can go to anywhere in the galaxy. You don't have to have everybody like, oh, I talked to Mando a few days ago. No, they don't have to. They're fine.
Right. We got to go to Tatooine. Of course you do.
Absolutely. I bet you enjoyed Spider-Verse, didn't you, Morgs, being a animated fan?
Yeah, like the Spider-Verse is like one of my favorite films like ever made, and I'm just looking forward to if there's a good animated Spider-Man series coming in the future, because I don't think I've seen one that I've liked quite as much as the '90s one, which is it's on Disney Plus as well, so you can stream that there as well. And it's just like, that's one of my favorite shows as well.
Well, they have that freshman year, right?
Yeah, freshman year. I've got the book of that one. Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
So that could be really exciting as well, too.
Yeah, that would be good to do.
Absolutely. Anyway, thanks for speaking with me today, guys. So, Sean, where can people find yourself and let people know all about Reelblend, Cinema Blend, and everything that you're doing?
Sure. Cinema Blend on a daily basis. We are, you know, reporting on all your entertainment needs there. We have a weekly podcast called Reelblend, where we do deep dives into the news of the week. And we often have a filmmaker guest on, do it with two of my friends. And then you can find me on social media at Sean _O'Connell, because there's a mixed martial arts guy who has my name and is extremely popular.
And
should you fight him for that name?
He can have it. It's totally fine with me. And then the book is coming out in November 1st. It's up for pre-order right now at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the different places where you can order books. So find a discount copy of it. And it's called With Great Power. And it's going to trace Spider-Man's entire Hollywood history up to this point, which continues to grow. So Maybe I'll do an addendum in a couple of years, add some more chapters about Venom 3 and Madam Web, whoever Sydney Sweeney is playing.
Absolutely. What about yourself, Stu? Stu World Order?
Yeah, so I have the Stu World Order podcast where we review random comic book movies drawn by our guest, and my show is nothing but full of happy accidents. So I will be recording 2 days from now for an episode where somebody randomly drew Spider-Man 1. So I got to watch it today for 2 different shows. Made me very happy. And I also have the website swoproductions.com where we have articles every single weekday, pop culture stuff, some fiction. We're getting a lot more fiction on there nowadays, just different articles every single weekday. And on Twitter, it is at SWO Productions. And that's usually just my meandering nonsense, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, including information on Pop-Tarts, apparently.
Oh yeah, Pop-Tart Quest on the website, very huge. I am going through every flavor of Pop-Tarts I can get my hands on and reviewing them for people. There are so
Essential. And Morgs, what are you up to?
Yeah, so we're at the Doh'Cast on Twitter, Instagram, and Spotify as well. So we should be coming back in about a month. We've got an episode coming with Nancy Cartwright, who voices Bart, so that's exciting. And yeah, so we'll be launching that too. And if you fancy any true crime, it's at The Untitled Chronicles on Spotify and Instagram as well.
Which episode is Nancy talking about?
She's talking about, I'm not too sure. We haven't worked out yet, but she will be on next week. So we're going to find out.
So these people that have worked on in The Simpsons, they pick an episode that's a favourite of theirs to discuss.
Yeah, so they pick their favourite episodes. Yeah. So we had Bill Oakley on. That was good. He talks about Who Shot Mr. Burns.
That's a classic episode.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Anyway, you can find pods like us on Instagram, Twitter, and on TikTok. Just look for @pods_like_us. And also, we have a Patreon if you just look for @pods_like_us there as well. And you can contact me on podslikeus@gmail.com. Anyway, thank you for speaking with me today, guys. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Appreciate you having us on.
And I think my neighbours are irritated because of it being nearly midnight over here.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
See you guys.
Thanks for listening, and hope you listen again
Night.
to another episode of Pods Like Us.